Hello, I'm Senator Rod Grams, and welcome to this month's special edition of our Washington Report. Now, the United States Senate has a rich history dating back to the founding of our nation. The Senate chamber has heard the powerful oratory of many great Americans, including Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, Everett Dirksen, and Minnesota's own Hubert Humphrey. Serving in the Senate where so much history has been written, it's truly awe-inspiring and humbling. And I think the inscription carved into the marble outside of the Dirksen Senate building captures the fundamental reason why, and it reads, "The Senate is the living symbol of our Union of States." No one knows more about that history and the role of our Senate in our government than my next guests. They are two of the most distinguished and longest-serving members in the Senate. My first guest is the President Pro Tem and senior member of the Senate, Senator Strom Thurmond from South Carolina. My guest for the second half of the show is the former Senate Majority Leader, Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia. Now, it's a true honor to have Senator Thurmond and Senator Byrd on today's show. And again, welcome to this month's edition of our Washington Report. We have a very, very special guest that is going to be joining us for a few minutes today, and that is Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. And Senator Thurmond was first elected to the Senate back in 1954 as the first and only write-in candidate for the United States Senate. He has served under 9 presidents, and he has seen tremendous change in the Senate since his election. He is the oldest serving member and the longest serving member of the United States Senate. So, Strom, it is a real pleasure and an honor.
Thank you very much.
That you're going to join
I haven't served under presidents, I've served with presidents.
That's correct. Good start. Strom, just kind of an opening question. What would you say is some of the biggest or significant changes in the Senate since you started in 1954? And I'm talking about maybe the size of the staffs or the relationship between colleagues. What would you say? Has there been tremendous change, or is a lot of it business as usual in the Senate?
Well, a lot of it is business as usual. There have been some changes. It's been a pleasure to be here and serve with these fine people and to know them. And when I talk with them, I can get a reflection of what they represent back in their states. And I have found the people who serve in here to be able and dedicated, and I think they do a good job.
Strom, you've been a public servant now since you were 27 years old. That's a long time.
Well, I started when I was 20 years old teaching school.
Oh, did you? Oh, and then you served as Superintendent of Education back in Edgefield County, South Carolina. What does it mean to you to be a public servant?
Well, I've done this all my life, and I've enjoyed it because anytime you feel you're doing something worthwhile to help people, it makes you happy.
And I don't know if a lot of people know it, but I think many do, that you did take time off from that public service to serve the country in another way, and that is when you enlisted in World War II, and you were among the force on D-Day and many other things that you did serve, so you were also serving the United States during the war in many different ways, and we appreciate that as well.
Well, I couldn't stand to see a war going on, and I was of age to go and not go.
Yes. And now, you served in the United States Senate for some 45 years. When you first decided to run for the U.S. Senate, did you ever think you would serve this long?
Well, I didn't have an idea that I would. I probably thought I wouldn't if I'd thought of it.
That's something that you probably never sat down and thought about.
Yeah.
How long am I going to serve when I get here?
That's right.
What was one of the reasons you decided to run?
Well, I felt I had been governor, and I'd always been told that to serve in the Senate is about the highest honor you can come to, except being president. And I ran for Senate because I thought I'd enjoy it, and I hoped I could run a good service.
You did run for president at one time as well, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
So you've been in all the arenas in public service.
Tried them all.
Tried them all. But why do you think you've been so successful in being re-elected time after time by the people of South Carolina?
Well, number one, and I think this is important for anybody in office, to be honest. And I have always tried to be honest in every way.
And I know I've heard from many people in your state and people who have had an opportunity to talk to but you have really paid a lot of attention to the people of South Carolina, their concerns, their needs, and also the needs of the country. I mean, that's one important thing in the Senate, that you look at the United States as a whole, but you've done a tremendous job when it comes to constituent service and really working for the people of South Carolina.
Well, thank you very much. I have tried to serve them to the best of my ability. They elected me, and I felt a deep obligation not to let them down.
What do you think is one of the biggest important issues the Senate is facing today? I know you're very concerned about our national security, and you continually to work very hard to ensure that.
I have always been deeply concerned about our defense. If we keep a strong defense, probability is we won't have a war.
That's right.
Some other nations will not attack us if we keep strong enough. If we don't keep strong enough, they'll be tempted to attack us.
You serve on the Armed Services Committee.
Yes, I've been on the Armed Services Committee practically ever since I've been here.
Now, you've witnessed many historic events during the 45 years that you've served in the United States Senate. Just to name a couple there, you were here during the Vietnam War, through the Cuban Missile Crisis, through the Watergate era, through Iran-Contra, a lot of these major parts of our history. Is there any one event that you feel was more significant than others during your time here?
No, I figured every event that I've been concerned with was important, and I felt it my duty to do the best I could in every one of them.
Now, you knew President Nixon very well. And when
yes, I helped elect him.
That's true. And during the Watergate era, which we mentioned, did you talk to President Nixon much during that time, and what advice did you give him?
Yes, I talked to him a good deal. I was close to Nixon, and I think he relied on me a lot. And I tried to give him the best advice I could. He didn't always follow it.
Now, you followed your father, who was a South Carolina prosecutor. He also was in politics. Would you want your sons or daughters to follow you into the political arena as well?
If they would be happy in it. I think the most important thing in the world is for a person to engage in something in which they'll be happy. If they're not happy, it's all off.
I guess there's a lot of ways that young people can help support the United States or serve the United States without being in elected office. So there's many things we can do to support that. How would you encourage our nation's youth to get involved in public service?
Say it quickly.
How would you encourage them to get involved in public service, and not if in elected office? In other areas?
Yes, I would. I would encourage our young people to get engaged in public service. I think in the first place it can do a lot of good, and in the next place I think it'll bring them many happy returns.
Strom, I just wanted to ask you one final question, and you know, we all know in the Senate what a filibuster is. And you hold the record for many things in the Senate. Like I said, the longest serving member, you were the oldest member of the United States Senate. You also hold the record for holding the floor of the United States Senate for the longest period of time, which is over 24 hours.
24 hours and 18 minutes.
Yes, it takes a lot to prepare for that. So hats off to you on that event, but could you tell me just a little bit about how you prepared for it?
Well, I tried to dry my body out in every way I could for several days. I went down to the steam room, tried to dry it out so I wouldn't have to go to the toilet.
Yes. So in other words, because being on the floor 24 hours, and I don't know if a lot of people realize, but as soon as you sit down, you give up the floor. And so you held it for 24 hours and 18 minutes.
Yeah. I could have gone longer, but we're going around the clock, and I thought that was enough.
Yes. Now, also, are you a believer in term limits now, Strom? I heard you said you were going to abide by term limits in the future.
Well, I think that's up to the individual. If he wants to serve longer and makes that decision, he ought to be allowed to do so. But I think after a man has served a reasonable time, he probably ought to want to get out and make way for other people.
You're up for election in 2002?
Yes.
I want to wish you the best of luck, Strom.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to run again.
Well, thank you for taking time to be with us, and I just
I'm glad to be with you, and I don't want to flatter you, but you consider one of the ablest men in this Senate,
Thank you.
and one of the most dedicated.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Strom, for joining us.
Good luck to you. God bless you.
Thanks, Strom.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And our very special guest on this portion of our program today is Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia. And Robert Byrd is probably one of the best-known senators and really one of the senators who knows the Senate the best. And you have written 4 volumes dealing with the Senate, plus many other things. And that's why I really wanted you, Bob, to be on this program to talk a little bit about the Senate and its history. And really, what does it mean to you to serve in the United States Senate? In other words, with all of the history that this body represents, all the responsibilities that comes with being a senator, what does it mean to you to serve in the United States Senate?
It's a tremendous honor to serve in the United States Senate. I don't consider that I have served under any presidents. Mm-hmm. I served with 10 presidents during my time in Congress. The Senate is, as far as I'm concerned, the spark of brilliance that emanated from the Constitutional Convention. The framers established the Senate as an institution that would bring dignity, that would debate, that would deliberate, that would cool the legislation that came over from the House. Mm-hmm. Senators were to be elected for longer terms. Originally, they were to be elected by the state legislatures, and they were expected to be men of property. And whereas Gary and others of the framers had a deep suspicion concerning democracy, its leveling effect. See, they'd had Shays' Rebellion just the previous year in Massachusetts, and they were concerned that the lower house would be too democratic, and so they established the Senate. The Senate also has as its roots the Roman Senate. Not very many people would know that, but Montesquieu was greatly inspired by the ancient Romans, and in turn he greatly inspired the constitutional framers. And so one of the things that inspired his political philosophy was the fact that the Roman Senate controlled the purse, and there were checks and balances in the Roman Senate. There was separation of powers in the Roman Constitution. So the Senate itself, in my judgment, this Senate, the United States Senate, and the Roman Senate have been the two greatest senates in all of history. And the U.S. Senate has fulfilled, I think, to a considerable extent, the expectations of the framers in this regard.
Has the role of the Senate changed, in your opinion, since it was framed in the Constitution by our forefathers? Has it changed, or have we been able to honor the tradition and the role of the Senate?
I think the framers would, on the whole, be pleased with the role that the Senate has played in approving nominations, for example, in the approval of treaties, and being a deliberative body, except for recent years. I think it would disappoint the framers, in recent years. Now you
in which way?
Well, you see, I came to the Senate 42 years ago. It was a considerably different place. There was real deliberation. There was no television in the Senate at the time, although I led the way. It was my resolution that brought television to the Senate. But I thought that we ought to move out of the 19th century and move into the 20th. And so television was important to keep the people informed and to let the people know that there were 2 houses of Congress, not just one. So the Senate has fulfilled its role, I think, in the main. But the deliberative aspect is not here anymore. You have not seen the Senate, the real Senate, as I saw it when I came here. It's changed a great deal in that respect. and largely because of the two-party system. It's become very partisan here.
More partisan, you mean, than?
Far more partisan than when I was here.
And as far as the deliberation, what would be maybe a cause that we've gotten away from that? Not probably just the TV. Is it just the pace, the amount of legislation faced, or?
No, it's not the amount of legislation faced. It's the fact that we have gotten ourselves into a system whereby we only really meet 3 days a week, Mondays and Fridays, and that doesn't allow a lot of time for deliberation. When I was majority leader, I told my colleagues on the Democratic side, we're going to be in 3 weeks and out 1, so you can go home, mix with your constituents. But the 3 weeks you're here, you can expect to vote. You will vote early on Mondays, and you will vote late on Fridays. You can count on it, and I saw to that. And we turned out in the 100th Congress, we set up an excellent record. We had deliberation, debates, we had votes, and we turned out important legislation.
Is that we don't have an opportunity to spend enough time on the floor? And I know there's a lot of constituent responsibility, meetings, and everything else that goes on, and it seems pulls senators in so many directions. And really, it all comes at the expense of no time on the floor. So we don't have the opportunity, maybe, to listen to the debates that you're talking about. Is that part of it, or do we just need to go back and make time?
That is part of it. But when I ran for the Senate in 1958, I ran with Jennings Randolph. We had 2 Senate seats available that year, and both of us ran. Both were Democrats. Both of us ran on a combined campaign treasure of $50,000. There wasn't much television in those days. Now it's so different. It costs so much to run for the Senate. The average perhaps of $4 million per seat. And in some states, $30 million. Won't surprise you. And senators are spending so much of their time out campaigning and raising money. This money chase is the most demeaning side of the Senate, of being a senator. It takes time. I was leader. I was majority leader, and I was minority leader. And one of our problems as leaders, when I was leader, was to accommodate this senator, that senator, and another senator, because they had to be here, thither, and yon, raising money. And consequently, it impinged on the schedule, the programming of the Senate's work, and it has become more and more that. That's a big reason why senators don't spend as much time in Washington, in the Senate, debating, and on committees as they used to.
What has been some of the biggest changes, do you think? Maybe, well, that's one big change, but others, the size of the Senate, the staffs, the committee sizes, any of that changed for the better or for the worse, in your opinion?
We have reduced the number of committees from what they were when I came to the Senate. Staffs have grown. Our work has grown. It will continue to grow. There's television in the Senate now. I think it was important that the people know what the Senate was doing. There are women in the Senate now. There was one woman in the Senate, Margaret Chase Smith of Maine, when I came to the Senate. Today, I believe there are 9, perhaps. So I think the framers would see something there, a big change. They would also, you mentioned more states. There were 96 senators when I came to the Senate, but the year I was sworn in, the 2 Alaska senators were also sworn, which made it 98. And in August of that year, the 2 Hawaii senators came, making it 100. So that number hasn't increased so much. We're living under programs that were new when I came here, or before I came here. I can remember the time when I was in the state legislature in West Virginia, and before that, we didn't have a lot of the programs we have now. We didn't have veterans programs. We didn't have Social Security. We didn't have welfare. But now these have compounded our problems by way of letters and calls.
I know we get about 5,000 letters a week in our office. I don't think people realize the volume that our office has to handle, and then trying to make sure we answer everyone correctly and get it in the right envelope and get it back to the right person.
Yes.
And when you make a mistake, it's pretty compounded. People say, you know, look, you mailed me the wrong letter. But I hope they understand of the volumes that we have to deal with. Senator Byrd, you're a real strong, I would say, traditionalist, high respect for the traditions of the Senate. And you're really one that's on the floor is asking basically for respect in the chamber. Do you think that has changed much?
It has.
Sitting in your seats, voting in the way it should be voted. I mean, just to respect the body itself and the tradition that this place embodies.
Few senators really know that there is a Senate standing order that requires senators to vote from their desks. And I always sit at when we vote, you'll find that I'm almost always sitting in my chair. The Senate looks very much like the floor of the stock exchange. I've been on the floor of the stock exchange, so have you. And you'll agree that at times the Senate, during roll call votes, finds senators milling around, talking in the well. Well, you can understand why they do that. They've been in committees. Now I get on the floor and I see a senator, I want to chat with him a few minutes, and I forget that I'm adding to the noise and the turmoil. And actually, it's the duty of the chair, without being asked from the floor, to maintain order in the Senate. Now, I've sat in the chair longer than any other senator. I sat in one sitting, 22 hours, during an overnight session when we were debating the great civil rights measures. I always maintained order in the Senate. I didn't wait for Rod Grams or John Doe or whoever it might be to call for order. I'd use that gavel, and senators will respect that gavel if they can hear it. I didn't just tap it. I hit that desk with that gavel. And so the reason I'm concerned about this is because we used to have great order in the Senate. Oh, there have been times when there have been less than order in the old days. But if the people, they now see the Senate through that little electronic eye, and if they have respect for the Senate, if they respect its dignity, it is the premier upper body in the world today. And many state legislatures look to the Senate as their paragon. They want to be like the U.S. Senate, but what do they see? They see a group of senators milling around in the well, and if the senators don't respect the Senate, they won't respect its product.
And we won't get respect outside.
Exactly.
What you talked about sitting in the chair for 22 hours during some of the great debates. What have been some of the biggest events that you've had the honor of being a part of in the United States Senate? What stands out in your mind as some of maybe the important votes, important debates? I know one part of the volumes of your books that you've written on the Senate includes some of the great speeches or debates. What would you consider some of the highlights? I know it's asking a lot because there's been a lot that has gone on, but what would you consider a highlight?
I think the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was one of the outstanding pieces of legislation, one of the outstanding events. There was Everett Dirksen, who was the minority leader, Mike Mansfield, the majority leader. Mike Mansfield turned this over, the leadership over, to Hubert Humphrey in that case. So you had Dirksen on one side, Humphrey on the other, both great speakers. And that civil rights debate went on for, I believe, 116 days, counting Sundays and Saturdays. We were in session six Saturdays. We had votes. I consider the votes on the line item veto, the constitutional amendment to balance the budget. These are among the great historic debates and votes. I was opposed to both, of course, and the Supreme Court has upheld my position on the line item veto.
What about votes on things committing this country to war or conflicts like Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, some of those. Have they been important times in your memory?
Yes, they've been very important. The problem here is that presidents more and more are seeking to grab power. And wars accommodate presidents in grabbing more power. And the Constitution says that one of the powers of Congress is to declare war. The problem is that the commanders-in-chief in recent years have put the military into various and sundry places. And the Congress has went along, has gone along. And really the only real power that Congress has is the power of the purse. That's why I've been such a staunch defender of it. And I used it in Somalia to draw a line and say this far and no farther. So if you want to keep our troops over there, that's the end. If you want to keep our troops longer, you have to come up here, make a case. So that power of the purse is the raw power. The war powers have enabled presidents, as I say, always in military conflicts, they gain in power. They gain in power. So the Constitution is very clear on that. The problem is these undeclared wars, where the presidents move the military into various places like Haiti, Somalia, Bosnia, these places, and ask for money, and Congress goes along for a while. Once they get the troops over there, Congress is hard put not to supply money. They're not going to see the troops go without food and clothing and weaponry. But this is a real problem area, and I'm concerned about it. The War Powers Act, I remember we enacted that, but it didn't really work. But more and more the presidents, this president we have now, Clinton, has been as bad as any of them in putting our men abroad and in wanting money to keep them there.
So you think the Senate should have, or at least Congress, have a more active role?
No question about it. And we're to blame. We're to blame
for allowing it to happen.
For allowing it to happen, not drawing the line. There are so many of, let's say, the same party in the Senate of the
President
of the White House generally goes along with him. But not I necessarily in these things. I put the Senate first. There are three equal branches, but the Senate is the predominant one.
Senator Byrd, Shakespeare once wrote, "What is past is prologue." Now, as we've said, you're a great student of history, as we know, and have written a definitive narrative of the history. Now, I just wanted to hold this up. This is just one copy. This is one volume. I think you have 4 volumes.
4 volumes.
That you've written on the Senate. Could you tell our viewers about the importance of history and that we learn from it or honor history? I don't know if you're disappointed with the recent article about graduate students
Very much so.
not knowing the history of the United States.
Many states don't have history taught in their public schools anymore. They teach social studies. Well, social studies are a far cry from history. I'm not saying anything against social studies. They may have their place. But we've gotten away from history. I talk with the pages that come to the Senate from every state in the Union, practically. And I always ask them, who is Nathan Hale? Well, if they don't know Nathan Hale, they haven't studied American history about the American Revolution. So Cicero said, to be ignorant of what happened before you were born is to remain always a child. Cicero was right. We can learn so much from history. Go back to the Garden of Eden. Water was H2O. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Never changed, has it?
No.
Still H2O. Same way with human nature. Cain slew Abel. And Cains are still slaying Abels every day, right here in this city, for example. So human nature hasn't changed. As long as human nature never changes, we'll still have individuals who want to be bullies in the international community, and we'll always have those problems. And so history is so important.
With 20 seconds we have left, do you encourage young people to get involved in public service as an important part or a way to serve their country?
In some ways it's a little hard to do anymore because of the bad reputation that we politicians have brought upon ourselves. But I tell them to clean it up. Get in there. Know what you're doing. Study history. Learn all you can. Keep on learning. And you'll clean politics up. And you'll render your country a great service.
Senator Byrd, thank you so much. We're out of time. We could talk for many, many more hours, but I really appreciate your time, and I want to thank you for your service to the United States Senate and to the country, and I appreciate your time on our program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.